Awesome. So, yeah, so tonight, if there weren't, I'd ask Russ and then ask you, the sentences, probably the main one that I like, that's kind of good to write on your heart is the number 5 of the ancient sentences is Seneca's errare est humanum. And this is a cool sentence for a couple of reasons. So, errare est humanum. And if you'll permit me, I'm going to get a little bit into grammar, because this will show us really what we don't necessarily need to know this right now, but it can kind of show us a little bit of things that we'll learn in the future. So far, we haven't worked with this first form a ton, but do you recognize what that form is, errare?
It's the infinitive.
Okay, cool. So it's the infinitive. Now, I'm going to get a little bit into grammar theory here for a second. So an infinitive, when we think of it, really what that is a verbal noun. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So an infinitive is a verbal noun, which means this, right? So when we say verb, what does that mean? Like, what's the kind of root idea of a verb?
Action.
Action, awesome. And then what's the root idea of a noun? Yes, stuff, so to speak. So we have, in the infinitive, we have action and stuff. So here, I'm going to show you how an infinitive can be both an action and stuff. So we'll leave this sentence for just a second, but we'll look at this English example. For example, I ought, we'll use that. I ought to love him. I ought to love him. So our simple subject and then our main verb is I ought. I ought. Okay? So what ought I?
To love.
I ought to love. Okay, so this is interesting. Here what we've got then is the infinitive acting like a noun, right? It's acting like a direct object. What ought I? I ought to love. So there we've got it, it's kind of, if I say it this way, it's nounness as a direct object. I ought to love. Okay, but then it kind of gets to get its verbness out, so to speak, in that it also takes a direct object. I ought to love. Whom ought I to love? I ought to love him. So you can see, with this infinitive, you can see it kind of doing double duty. It's doing nounness, so to speak, in that it's the direct object of this verb ought. I ought to love. Then it's doing its verbness, so to speak, again, that it's taking a direct object. I love him. But no, it's I ought to love him. Does that make sense? Kind of see how that flows? And so in this sentence, actually, we get a couple of neat examples of how it can, again, act like a noun. Not as much as a verb here, okay? So, errare est humanum. What's our translation of that?
To err is human.
Okay, good. To err is human. So let me just write that up here, because our English is actually going to be just as good as our Latin here. So. Okay. Oh, and just a reminder, what does infinitive mean? Do you remember that?
The verb unconjugated.
Good. Yeah, it literally means not limited, but that's kind of how it works out, is that it's not conjugated. So it's not limited by a subject. Okay? So that's what's happening here. Okay? So to err is human. So what is the conjugated verb in that sentence? It's actually not. To err would be our infinitive. So what is our verb that's conjugated?
S.
It's est, right. So est is our conjugated verb. In English, right, is. Okay. And then what part of speech is human? Human. Now this is, I was going to say, now this is a part of speech that can do a couple different things. You could say, for example, the humans, fight the aliens or whatever it is. There it would be a noun, but here, look at what it's doing. And so we have to use our context. It is an adjective. Okay, if it's an adjective, right, we have to ask the question, what is the adjective modifying? What is human? Erring is human. That's exactly right. So here we get this cool example of how an infinitive can be a noun, or can work like a noun, a verbal noun. To err, or again, like you said, erring, though that's technically a different form, but to err is human. So we have an adjective, human, modifying err. And then what does our adjective rule tell us? That adjectives always
Match the noun in case, number, and gender.
good. Case, gender, case, and number. Okay, so this is really cool. So if that's right, that means I can actually tell what gender the verb errare is. Humanum.
Masculine.
Careful. It could be masculine if it were an accusative, right? So, us, okay. That could be it. It's actually not, because it's our subject. So the subject has to be in what case? Nominative, okay? So this is a subject noun in the nominative, which means this adjective has to be a predicate adjective also in the nominative. And if that's true, humanum is what gender in the nominative?
Neuter.
Neuter. So we have a neuter adjective, which means that the infinitive is acting like a neuter noun.
But are all infinitives neuter?
They are. They are all neuter nouns, is how we treat them. So there you go. That's kind of a crazy little sentence. That was number 5.
But it was easy to put it into English.
Yeah.
It would be harder to go the other way.
That's right, yeah. So I did kind of preface it with a little bit of now, just so you know, this is kind of a little bit out of our league, but that's what's happening there. So it's pretty cool.
We're not late, are we?
You are. I think it starts at 8, right?
8:30.
Is it 8:30? Did I email that wrong? I probably did.
Did you tell everybody it was 8?
It started at 8.
I think I did, but that's okay.
It started at 8:30 like every other time.
Did it? Oh, then I'm done.
Where's everybody else? So everybody else thought the same thing?
Yeah, and that's okay. We haven't even gotten to the new chapter. So technically, we're starting 2 minutes early in 10 seconds. But with that said, we're just going over the last sentences. So did you guys have any that you kind of found challenging or fun? Okay, give me one, Rose.
Okay, number 12. Without wisdom, the sailor's good fortune is nothing, and they are paying the penalty.
Yes.
Why is that funny?
It's funny because
it's an awful English sentence.
No, the thing that's funny is, I find this to be the case, no pun intended, is that the longer a sentence gets, the more overwhelmed we feel as
and there's one
new
where it's
learners.
got like a double, like a wait.
Oh, yeah, a compound verb.
That,
right?
I need
Yes.
to do that one too.
Yes,
That
okay.
was-
So let's look at number 12. Without wisdom, the sailor's good fortune is nothing, and they are paying the penalty. Okay, and I actually think there's a grammar error there, because you should have a comma beforehand, because you introduce a new subject.
Right.
But oh well, I won't be picky. I have made my fair share of grammar errors. Without wisdom, the sailors, plural, okay, good fortune is nothing, and they are paying the penalty. I've got to add the comma, that'll bug me. And they...
Are there commas in Latin?
There are. But that's always the challenge, right? Is when you're going from language A into language B. It doesn't even matter what language A would do in some sense. It's how does language B make me do this or make me say this or punctuate in this case. There's nothing, and they are paying the penalty. Okay. All right. So, So question. Start off with our subjects, verbs, verb subjects. Give me my verbs, Rose.
Is.
Okay, good. And what kind of special verb is?
Linking verb.
Good, linking verb. So I'm gonna have a predicate nominative or a predicate adjective in the nominative. Okay, other verbs.
Are.
Okay, now this is tricky, and actually this is something that the 5th graders are working on. It's are paying. And that is so so tricky. It's not something we're used to. So I want to remind us of this. I think I did this at the Latin seminars this summer, but I'll use the example, I sit. So in Latin, sedeo, I sit, can actually come out to be two different things in English, so to speak. Or we could see the English two different ways and still have sedeo. So it could be sedeo, I sit, or it could be, hey Jay, it could be sedeo, I am sitting.
Right.
And Jay, I totally messed up the email, so don't feel self-conscious. I realized I put it half an hour early. But that's totally on me. It's totally on me.
I walked in, I was like,
You're good. No, you're good. You're spot on. I mean, 45 seconds, but I'm going to So in English, we have two present tenses. Oops, am I off the screen? Yeah, I am, but the tenses. So in English, we have two presents. The one is a simple present, I sit, which is funny because we almost never use that in the present. Right? Like,
unless
what are you doing right
stuff.
now? I'm sitting.
Right.
We don't say, I sit. Like, it's, anyway. So ironically, our present we don't use for the present. So I sit versus I am sitting. We call it the present progressive. So to form the present progressive, we use the form of to be plus the present participle. Latin does not do that. Latin just has one form of the present, though sometimes in English, we kind of grab that, we grab a helping verb, and actually we're going to see this with the future also in this next chapter. In English, what we do is we, take, often, for many tenses, we'll take a verb, like I do, and then we add helpers. So like I do becomes I will do, becomes I did do. So we never actually change the word do, we use different helpers around it. Will do, did do, whatever that is. What?
Did done.
Did done, right, exactly. So Latin's different in that Latin will actually change the verb itself to do that. So when we see they are paying, that's not a linking verb, right? Because it doesn't equate they with paying. So we don't have a true linking situation. But this is another great example of why English grammar is sometimes almost the worst place to start. Or it's a rough place to start. I shouldn't say the worst place.
Madeline had trouble with that too.
Yeah.
She kept wanting to put
est, whatever, or
right.
sunt, or whatever.
And I didn't know how to explain
and that is always the case with students. I mean, with very few exceptions, they want to see this, which is good, right? That they're seeing that and saying linking verb, but it's bad because that's not how Latin builds a verb. So that's where that confusion comes in. Okay, so we've got our verb. What are our subjects?
They.
Okay.
And fortune. No, fortune.
Oh, yeah.
Good. So what was the temptation to say?
Sailors.
Sailors, right?
Yeah.
Right, and you know what? It's so funny, and like that's such a, in one sense, it's such a simple observation, but it's just, okay, what is the noun doing? So fortune is nothing, right? Is that subject, noun, linking verb, predicate, predicate adjective? Predicate noun, nothing, is in this case noun. Welcome to grammar. Okay, so this, we call it predicate adjective.
With the sailors though, don't you have to use that genitive or whatever case? Is that?
You do, yeah.
That's the way you always.
That is it.
Possessive.
Yes,
Okay,
that's it.
That was confusing.
So now, let's just start labeling. So we've got sailors, you're right, that's going to be a genitive plural. We've got good. Good, what part of speech?
Adjective.
Adjective, what's the adjective modifying?
Fortune.
Fortune, good. So and it's one thing, I know not every student has to do this, but I love to make the students draw the arrows so that they're always going, it's matching this now. So it is bona fortuna in this case. We'll see. Okay.
Yep.
All right, what else do we have kind of happening here?
Prepositional phrase.
Okay, good. Prepositional phrase out front, without wisdom. So prepositional phrase, and then one last thing, penalty. Direct object, good. And a direct object. Okay. That'll go in the accusative, right? Okay. So now we just can kind of put it together. So without wisdom.
Sine sapientia.
Good. Sine sapientia. There's a great, actually, I just came across this word for the first time. The word sinecure. Have you heard this word? So a sinecure, I learned, is it's a political position where you have no responsibilities. So it'd be like, hey, you're my buddy. Yes, literally, without a care, without a concern. So a sinecure, it's your nephew or whatever. And anyway, so a sinecure, there you go. So sine sapientia, without wisdom. The sailor's good fortune is nothing. So let's grab our subject first.
Fortuna.
Good, fortuna, and it is what kind of fortune?
Good
fortune.
bona.
Good. So I'm going to do something here that John likes to do in his gospel, is where we sandwich. So we kind of, so to speak, we imagine that we're keeping it safe so that it doesn't get mixed up with something else. So for example, I'm going to put sailors right now, Tottenham. I'm going to put it in between our subject, fortuna, and the adjective that it modifies. And I'm doing that so that, just in case you had something like, without the wisdom of the sailors. So this is a way where a Latin writer or a Greek writer would kind of almost like protect you from making a mistake. Like,
it's confusing because you know how good is an adjective that modifies fortune?
Yes.
Well, it seems like sailors sort of modifies fortune too, but you don't conjugate it as such.
You don't. And that's the most common mistake with the
But you
genitive.
understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So the most common mistake with the genitive is to really forget your parts of speech, right? So a noun in the genitive has the job of showing possession in other things, but for us, possession. An adjective is a completely different part of speech that matches the noun and modifies in gender, case, and number. But most often when we're learning, Latin, Greek,
So
whatever
you would
it is,
just call that a possessive noun.
that's exactly right. It's
So
a
that's why
possessive
it's
noun.
not
That's exactly right. But that is such a common mistake, is to be like, well, it should match. It's modifying it, but it's like it's actually not modifying it. It's possessing it in this case. Okay. So without wisdom, the good fortune of the sailors, nice plural, is nothing. Es nihil. And I think they should give you a little note that nihil is indeclinable.
I know, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah. Now, in medieval Latin, it stops being indeclinable. So that's where we get, for example, God creates, do you know the theological term that we use? Ex nihilo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so in classical Latin, it was indeclinable, or we didn't decline it. But by the time you get into medieval Latin in the writing of theology, they'll actually start saying ex nihilo, or nihilo. So that's what it will become. But in the classics, I'm trying to think if I can find an example in my head.
And that would be ablative.
That would, yeah, because ex is a preposition that needs its object to be nihilo. Okay. And they are paying. So we don't need a they, right? Because we can just pick up our previous subject. And here we have a little bit of we have an idiom, but it actually comes through.
That's the darent poene.
Good. And they are paying. So it becomes dunt. Koinos.
Wait a minute. Why dunt?
Who is paying?
They.
Yeah.
But why? Because darent already ends in an NT, so it seems like it should stay that way.
Say again. Oh, your verb. Okay, go back to your vocab, or if you look at your vocab, and it shows you. So this is do dara. So the are is actually going to drop.
Oh, the whole thing.
So yeah, it's really just d plus an a and then endings. So dunt is what it becomes.
That's confusing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So and actually, short verbs are often. It's funny, they're confusing because they're short. So we'll meet one. I don't think we've met it yet. I go. Eo, ire, and it's just one syllable always. Is, it, the plurals become two, but anyway. Imos, itis, eont. But anyway, and that's actually like the most confusing form I think the students see is like, it, what is it? And it's like, it's actually really simple. It's just this one letter stem plus the ending. But for some reason that throws them. Okay.
Can you do 11 also?
Yeah, 11.
Really hard.
Yeah, and just as I think I've said this before, but just as a mental, shot in the arm, the into Latin should always be your hardest.
Yes.
They should always be the hardest.
The English is now kind of easy.
Good. Or getting much easier. And that's kind of the way it should go. The hardest assignments I ever give high school students is when they have to translate a poem or a song into Latin. And then it gets even more fun when they have to write their own and then put it in Latin meter. And that's they're tearing hair out of their head because it's so challenging. But it's really fun. But I basically say, okay, make yourself do it for 4 hours and then call it a day. But it's hard. It's really hard. And that's like for a week, so you know, you don't have to be scared about it. Okay, number 11. The daughters and sons of great men and women are not always great. That is true. Did you ever watch Shark Tank?
No.
Yeah.
There's a, I can't remember who said this, but there was one of the guys, so it's about like kind of self-made millionaire, billionaire investor guys and gals. And like one of them said, I would never invest in, like you come on and you pitch like your invention or whatever it is, and they're like, I would never invest in a child of a millionaire.
Yeah.
And that got them all going like, that's nonsense. Like you're telling me my kids can't be successful? Anyway, so it was really funny. But needless to say, obviously, the daughters and sons of great men and women are not always great. Nor are the daughters of men of not great women always not great. There you go. All right. Which is to say, that's almost a waste of breath. But that's okay. It's like saying, just because your daddy was your daddy doesn't mean that you're going to be him or her. Okay. Verb.
Are.
Are. Yeah. What kind of verb is are?
Linking verb.
Linking verb. Okay. Now if I have a linking verb, I'm loading up in my mind. I'm going to have a subject noun in the nominative and then a predicate noun or predicate adjective also in the nominative. Okay, so what is our subject noun?
Daughters and sons.
Okay, good. Here we have to be especially vigilant because this would be the kind of thing that throws a lot of students because they're thinking, oh, look how close, you know, men and women to are, how about that, to that verb. Okay, subject noun in the nominative, subject noun in the nominative, and then what's our predicate noun or predicate adjective?
Great.
Great. Good, great. Predicate adjective. Okay. And then otherwise, let's see what we've got. We've got and, which is what part of speech?
Conjunction.
Conjunction, good. So nothing to do there, just we got to know our vocab. Of great men and women.
Prepositional phrase.
Okay, now in English, we load up a prepositional phrase in our mind. In Latin,
Possession.
double genitive. Yeah, so yeah, genitive in this case. And in that too, this is a good example of probably not possession. I don't think. Actually, that's an interesting question about parenting. Are you the possessors of your child? Are you the associate? Yeah.
No.
As fathers with daughters, yes, you are the possessors of your child. Okay. But anyway, we've got a double genitive. So we've got men, right? That's going to be a genitive. And we've got women. That's going to be a genitive. And then we've got great, part of speech. And what's it doing?
Adjective, modifying both great, or men and women.
Good. Okay, so we've got an adjective, and this is where, if we have a background in Spanish or pretty much any language, it's going to work the same way. Okay, so actually both of our examples of great are going to do the same thing. So in Romance languages, in most languages, I don't know an exception to it. If you know one, you let me know. But in most languages, it works this way. If you're talking about 1 million people and there's one male in that million, the adjective will become masculine. Yeah. If you're talking about 1 million people and they're all women, then it's going to be feminine. If you're talking about a mixture, you know, any male, any number of males makes that a masculine pronoun. That's right. So it's almost like in my mind I was thinking it's kind of the opposite of Victorian England, you know, where it's like women and children first. It's like males would dominate that language. I don't know. Although in Victorian England, let's not act like they were great to women. Okay. Anyway, although they let them off the boats first, so not freeze, I guess. Okay. So all of our adjectives, in this instance, all of our adjectives that are going to become masculine because we have a mixture of, you know, men and women and then daughters and sons. Okay. I think that's it. Oh, and then not. Ooh, what part of speech is not?
Adverb.
Adverb. And always?
Adverb.
Adverb. Good. Not and always both adverbs. Okay. So daughters as a nominative plural.
Maybe A.
Filii.
I don't know how to say that though. How do you say the A?
Filii.
I.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So filii et sons.
Filii.
Filii. Mm-hmm. And that Y, by the way, you can hear what's going to become in medieval Latin an actual Y. So filii. So with that, when an I starts a syllable, or it's really sandwiched between a consonant now and a vowel, or diphthong in this case, it's going to become a wa, or sorry, not a wa, a ya sound. Forgive me. So filii et filii. Filii et filii. So trying to think of a good example that you would know. Probably the most famous would, well, Jesus becomes a J because of German. Anyway, Jesus would be Jesus, starting I-E-S-U-S. Second declension masculine. But yeah. But then German comes in and it becomes a ja sound. So there you go. So we actually, every time we say Jesus, we are acting like Jesus has of German descent, or at least his name is. So that's just to make everybody depressed. All right. Of great men and women. So of men. Come from weary.
Virorum.
Yeah, virorum. And here again, I'm going to sandwich my adjective. Virorum et, and I'm going to grab some great.
Magnorum.
Magnorum, good. And I can do this because it's just fun. And then women.
Feminarum.
Feminarum, good.
Right? I guess I did it right.
Yeah.
You said that, and I looked at it, and I thought, I have no idea what word he's talking about. Like, that's how
It looks, you're hearing it very differently. Okay, and then R. Sunt, good. And then great. Let's grab great.
Magni.
Good, magni, because it needs to modify a masculine, a group with a masculine.
That was what I had a hard time with, because I was like, well, which one should it agree with?
Yes.
Because that was confusing.
That's a great question. It is a great question. So, and then not, right, known, semper.
So you just pick masculine. Just do it masculine.
Well, actually it's a great question. I mean, why do languages follow the patterns they follow?
Because it said, I looked in there, it said that usually agrees with the nearest to the masculine off.
Yeah, though the masculine kind of trumps. Yeah, so you could do it, and even here, like if you said great and you said, magni, you could still see what the sentence means. Yeah, because what it's saying is, what if you had daughters second? Then daughters would be closer, in proximity, but it's fine. Or both ways. Okay? All right, let's get into the new grammar, because that's actually where not that we'll have problems, I don't think that'll be the issue, but it's where I want to get us a lot of practice. So, first, no pun intended, first we're going to just talk about conjugation patterns. And when I post this video, you actually can go through my other videos if you want to, and I counted 4 other videos on this topic. So if you want to see it explained slightly differently, or you want a larger system, I've got hours of this kind of stuff. But today we're just going to do 2 patterns and then the future and imperfect. Okay. So first, before we get to tenses, let's just talk about, first of all, nouns. And actually, Kate had said earlier, just realizing that a noun has a set pattern, right? The nouns have set patterns and the adjectives change, right? The adjectives are the chameleons that change to match the tree. So if we had, right, let's say amicus, right? Amicus, amici is, amicus, amici is a second declension masculine noun. It is not going to change. That is its set pattern. It is set. Same thing. Femina, femini. What declension pattern is femina, femini?
First.
First declension, right, feminine. And then one more, let's say, bellum, belly. Neuter. Second declension, neuter. Okay? So these are all nouns, and nouns are set in their ways. So just to be clear, this is second declension masculine. This is a first declension feminine. And this is a second declension neuter. Okay? And it's the pattern that tells me that. So when I see us, e, I know in my mind the pattern that goes us, e, o, e, orum, is, os, is, e. Okay? When I see I know, oh, that's my first declension. It goes I, is, as, is, I. Good. When I see e, I know that's a second declension neuter. E, o, is, So just like skip counting or whatever, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, it's the same thing. I know these patterns, okay? So nouns are in a pattern. They are going to stay in their pattern, okay? Adjectives are going to change. Adjectives are going to play the role of chameleon. And what Kate had said, which is so great to remind us, is that an adjective, that's why it has 3 forms, right? That's why I need litus, lita, litum. Because I need it to be neuter, or feminine, or masculine, depending on that context.
But then the endings also get just like...
That's right. Then the endings will decline also, right? So if I had of the friends, right, amicorum, and if it was the happy friends, laetorum amicorum, of the happy friends. So they are always going to change to match. They're going to play the chameleon role. They're always going to change. And that was my Greek professor who helped me so much with that illustration. Adjectives are chameleons. In this sweet Mississippi accent. Do you know why adjectives are like chameleons? Because they change. That is what that animal does. Okay, so anyway, we're a part of all that we have been. You know this? Okay, so adjectives are going to change. Now, verbs are going to be similar, more similar, I should say, to nouns, not adjectives. Okay? Verbs have patterns as well. So I'm going to put up a handful of verbs, and I think we've seen this already, but I'm just going to put up a handful of them so that we can maybe try to guess, well, what are some of those verb patterns? So we'll go sedo, sedere, and I'm just going to put the first 2 principal parts, because we don't need more right now. Okay. So we've got 4 verbs, just the first 2 parts of each. Sedeo, sedere, festino, festinare, moneo, manere, and umbolo, umbulare. As you look at these verbs, what do you see that's similar, or what do you see that's different?
The infinitives have either ERE or ARE.
Okay, so this is huge. This is actually the key thing you've got to look for today. In the infinitives, we see that all of these verbs, and this is true, every regular verb in Latin, every regular verb, and even some of the irregulars, their infinitives will all end in val re. Always. Always, always. Okay?
Do you mind repeating that?
Yeah.
When will they always?
The infinitive, the
Yeah.
second form
Yeah.
that we give, sedeo, sedere, it will always end in vowel re. Always.
And is it always either ARE or ERE?
That's what we're going to get into. So there are a total of 4 different patterns. For this chapter, we're only going to start working on 2 of those patterns. And that's what these are. Okay? We call them the first conjugation and the second conjugation. Okay? So, and actually, what's funny is that, even that reaction, right, is it's all these syllable words, right? It's like, we can't just say, like, first verb pattern. It's just not nearly technical enough. We have to say first conjugation, second conjugation. Okay, but all that means is verb pattern. Just like declension means noun and adjective pattern. Okay? So the first conjugation is going to, and this is where it is nice being an English speaker, it's going to follow our alphabet. So the first conjugation pattern is going to go A, R, E. And I'm just going to like quadruple underline the A. A, R, E. So we can always go to the infinitive, and I can look at the infinitive, and I can go, is there an A-R-E ending? Okay, so here on this board of 4, sedeo, sedere, festino, festinare, maneo, manere, and umbolo, umbulare, what are the first conjugation verbs?
Festinare and ambulare.
Good. Festinare and umbulare. Okay? And you could do the same thing in your book. You could go through your vocab, your verbs, and you could go, can I, pick out first conjugation verbs? So just for fun, flip to page 34 and let's see if we can.
34.
Yeah, page 34. Oh, and actually they're not even gonna tell you what they are. Or probably they're just gonna tell you. So can anybody find a first conjugation verb on page 34?
Can anyone find a verb?
You actually do have to go a little bit down if you can find a verb, so don't feel bad about that.
The only verb I see is this ridiculous remaneo.
Good, remaneo, remanere. Okay, remaneo, remanere. Is that a first conjugation verb?
No.
How can you tell it's not?
Because it's an E.
Because it's got an E. Okay, so now I might as well tell you that's the second conjugation. The second conjugation will have an ERE, a long E, and this actually matters a lot. The long ERE. So please, 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 for the love of yourself, make sure you put that mark in there. That long, long, long mark. It is an ERE, not an ERE. Okay, so here we can see sedere has a long E and manera has a long E. Right? They are both second conjugation patterns. Okay? Now the reason why you don't see any first is actually if you look up, do you see how they've just put a number 1 next to some other verbs? Kano, and then they put a number 1. So what that means is that verb goes kano, kanare. Culpo, culpare. Right, mea culpa.
Okay.
My bad. Supero, superare. And that's the shorthand way that we just say, hey, this is first conjugation. I'll put a 1 next to it because it's so stable. It does exactly what we would expect every time. Okay? And again, you could even go back in vocab and do the same thing. You could look back and go, oh, yowo, yoware, yui, yutum. Oh, first conjugation. Okay. So you can go backwards and do the same thing or look at your vocab cards. So tonight, what we're working on is specifically first and second conjugation verbs, and we're going to work on them in 3 tenses. Okay? The first tense we've already done. The first tense is the present. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's just remind ourselves, what does it mean if a verb is in the present tense?
It's happening now.
It's happening now. That's it, right? Present means happening now. So I'm going to draw this fancy little timeline up here because we're going to need it in just a second. So in the middle of my timeline is now. This can be the future or not yet. This can be the past or then. Okay? And the present tense happens now. Latin has 1 present tense. English has a couple. Right? I sit or I am sitting. Latin just 1. Set out. Okay? In the summer at the Latin camp, that's really, I think, completely what we worked in. We didn't go to any other tenses, right? So we learned that with a first conjugation, with a second conjugation verb, how do we conjugate a verb in the present tense? Okay, so that's actually the second part, right? The endings are our second part. O, st, mus, tis, nt.
You take off the E, the RE, and you fill the backgrounds if you need to.
Good. Okay, so I'll grab one of those verbs. Festino, festinare. So I have my O form, right? It's given to me, or I memorize it. So I can just copy that down. Oops. And then otherwise I chop off the RE, gives me my, what do we call that? Festina.
Stem.
Good, the stem. So I'm going to just copy my stem, and this is what I have the students do always, always, always at the beginning. Because I just want them to get used to that idea of, okay, I got my stem, and here we go, there's my stem, festina, sorry, I got a little sloppy. Okay, and now I have my endings, so I've got O, S, T, Mus, Tis, And then the last step is to kill those two macrins on the third person forms. So festinat and festinat, rather than festinat or festinat or something. Okay. Same thing for the second, sedeo sedere becomes sedeo, sede, sedet, sedemos, sedete, sedet. Okay. Any questions on present tense? Present tense, good. Thumbs up.
Yes.
I'm looking on video. I don't see thumbs. There's the thumb. All right. Okay. So what we're about to see is how awesome Latin is for identifying tenses. So far what we've had is like the factory model verb, if I can use a car analogy, right? So it is nothing souped up. It is just stem plus ending. Okay? Stem plus ending. But what we're about to see is that you can actually look at a Latin verb and tell what tense it's in. Unlike English, that's going to use helpers, like I will go or I did go. Latin, not so. So first I want to do the imperfect. Okay. And all of these verbs, let me just say, all of these verbs are what we call the present system. Okay? The present system of verbs. So the first verb tense in the present system is the present. It's very advanced. Okay. The next verb in the present system is what we call the imperfect. Now, don't let the names throw you. And this is something that even with the 5th graders I try to teach them is, at the beginning of a lesson, I'll put a title up on the board. And before you even start doing anything, I want them to start to think about, what am I about to learn based on the title of it? Okay. So if I said that this verb tense is called the imperfect, what would you guess that means? Okay, past. Why would you guess past?
I don't know, because we're going to be perfect in the future.
Okay, that's a good guess. Maybe it's because the future will be perfect.
Not completed?
Okay, not completed is literally what it means. So there's a Latin verb here. There's a Latin verb. He's a doctor. What are you going to do? Okay.
I know everything.
The Latin verb here is perficio, and perficio means I accomplish or I finish. So you could say like laborum perficio. I accomplished my work. I finished my work. Okay. Imperfect just means not finished. Not finished. But you're right. It's actually a past tense action that's not finished. It is imperfect. Okay. Imperfect. So I drew a long arrow in the past because when we see an imperfect, here's what it does in its story. And you got to think of it in terms of story. So you're reading Caesar. You're reading the Gospels. It doesn't matter. And what you'll see is the imperfect is used this way. Ready? When Jesus was walking on the Sea of Galilee, up ran a man. And so what the imperfect normally does for us is it actually kind of paints a scene. It's like the background of, we have this painting in our house that my grandfather did, Leslie's grandfather did, of a cowboy on his horse. And there's like these rolling hills behind him. That's the imperfect. There were hills rolling and a cowboy rode on them, or something like that. So the imperfect is almost always used to set this scene with this ongoing action. Okay? Caesar was marching to France when he was ambushed. And that he was ambushed would be a verb tense called the perfect. It is a done action, or it is a kind of simple, completed action. Okay? The perfect, we're not to it yet. Actually, we won't be there for a while. But the imperfect, you kind of have to see a little bit of how they relate to know what's going on, or to better understand it. Okay? So you have this ongoing action. I was walking my dog when I was struck by a car. It sets the scene for the next action, usually. Okay? All right, so here's how you make it. And this is where, I'm sorry, this is just where I'm cheesy, and I've taught grammar school kids and middle schoolers for too long. You know the children's rhyme, Ba Ba Black Sheep? Okay, now we might say a black sheep would be imperfect, in a different sense, right? And so every time you see a ba in a verb, it's an imperfect. Okay? So here's how you form it. We take our stem, and by the way, the present system, what that means is all of them build off the same stem. Okay? So we saw festino, festina as our stem. So let me grab that stem. So festina.
Even what normally was a festino. Oh.
Yeah, so that's a little bit odd because what happens is contraction. The A and the O kind of fight it out, and the O beats the A. So we have our stem, festina. That actually tells me, oh, I'm in the present system. I'm now building on the present system, which actually brings me down to only 3 options for tense. Then I'm going to see what we call the tense sign. The tense sign. Okay. And what that means is when I see this, I know the tense I'm in. And the tense sign of the imperfect is ba. So far I'm at festina ba. And the last thing are the endings that we already learned. Okay, with one change. Instead of ost or ost, it is now mst, mus, tis, nt. And these are fun with younger kids. We don't get into it until 6th grade, but they get to say bum and butt in the same conjugation, so it's great times for them. Okay. So when you read a Latin text, and it's crazy, your eyes already could do this. You could sit in front of a text and go, bah, I bet that's an imperfect. And it just pops at your eyes, okay? So I'll conjugate this here.
That's like a long word.
What?
Festina.
It does. And you can kind of see, one is we already have 3 syllables in our stem. But here we go. So I'm going to go my stem, festina, plus ba, plus m. Festina, plus ba, plus s. Festina, plus ba, plus t. Festina, plus ba, plus mus. Festina, plus ba, plus tis. And festina, plus ba, plus nt. Now, just like with the present, we're not done. What are our death letters? What are our Macron killers?
T. No. Nt.
Okay, int is a killer. Yeah, nt anywhere is going to kill it. So sure enough, we have festina bunt, not festina bunt. So I always joke with the kids, like, bunt. What's a bunt? And they'll say, it's a short hit on a baseball field. And I'll say, that's incorrect. They'll say, it's a cake. And I'm like, that's incorrect. It's a short hit on the baseball field. Okay, so what else kills Macrons? This is how I entertain myself teaching. If you're torture.
T at the end?
T at the end, good. So it's but, not bot. Okay, festinabat. Probably festinabat. And one more. They are death letters. M, R, and T. Okay, so M, R, or T at the end.
So the bomb thing.
Yes, so bomb instead of bomb. Good. So we get bum, bos, but, bomus, batis, bunt. That will always be those endings. Okay. Now, in case you want to know, some Latin teachers will teach bum, bos, but, bomus, batis, bunt. Bum, bos, but, bomus, batis, bunt. The reason I don't is because when we want to make these passive in about 10 lessons, all we do is change the ending. That's all we have to do. To make it from, say, I was hurrying, festinabum, to I was being hurried, festinabar, with an R at the end instead of an M. Okay? So it is built in. The tense sign is what says, hey, I'm an imperfect. So I would say, ba, ba, imperfect sheep, have you any wound? Ba, 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 ba. Ba, ba. And I just keep saying it because the students, I want them to really get that ba tells me I have an imperfect. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, I want you guys to all try to conjugate a verb in the imperfect. So I'll give you the verb. I'm going to erase this. I'll leave stem sun, pardon me, plus tense sun plus ending. Let's conjugate the verb. Let's say I was sitting. So, sedeo, sedera. Now, first of all, before you do this, what conjugation is sedeo, sedera?
Second.
Second, good. That E tells me I am a second conjugation. S-E-D-E-O, S-E-D, long E, R-E. Okay, so go ahead and try to conjugate that in the imperfect. Okay, Russ, what is your stem? Good, sede. Okay, what is the tense sign of the imperfect, Jay?
The tense sign of the imperfect is ba.
Ba, that's right. And again, what does that mean, tense sign? Jay, what do you think that means?
Tense sign is just saying that it's past, it's in the past. Is that where you're not asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what does that ba tell me? When I see that ba at the end.
It's indicative of something is imperfect.
Yeah, that's right. That's all it is. So ba tells me that my verb's imperfect. That's all it is. Okay. And then my endings. Okay. So I get sede bum, short a, bum. Sede bas, stays long. Sede but, short t. Sede bamus, sede batis, and sede bunt, short. Okay. I was sitting, you were sitting, he was sitting, we were sitting, y'all were sitting, they were sitting. Okay.
Does it kill all of the macrons? The macron killers kill all of the macrons?
Just right in front of it.
Okay.
That's right, just immediately in front of it. So we would have, for example, sede bum. It would just take off the immediately preceding.
Okay.
All right. So now we can see that if I come across the verb, I can actually tell just by the form of the verb what tense it is. Again, in the present is the one without anything special going on.
But like the first versus second conjugation don't really matter.
They don't. They actually don't. They where it matters, it is not here.
Okay.
Honestly, where it matters will come up a little more in some other systems, in the other system. Okay. So the other tense that we're going to look at is the future. Okay. So what do you think the future tense means if I have a verb in the future?
I'm going to do something.
Not yet started?
Yeah, it's not yet started, right? So the future tense would be in the future. Is basically, right, that's it. Okay, so I'll just put it out here. And just like the present, Latin's future tense has two, we could translate it in two ways. So in the present, right, I sit and I am sitting. In the future, I will sit or
I will be sitting.
I will be sitting. That is a clunky way to talk, but you could do it. I will be attending the party. Something like that. Okay. Same thing in Latin as in English with the present and the future. Latin just has one form. English uses those helpers. Latin does not. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing. First thing with the present system is we need our present stem. So let's grab a verb, moneo, with an O, moneo, monere. And again, like you said, Rose, I could pick a first or second conjugation here. Okay. All right, so what would be the stem of moneo, monere?
Mone.
Mone. Okay, so I'll just write it underneath. Mone. Now, the future's tense sign is just a B. When I see a B before the endings, I know it's going to be the future. Okay? But here I'm going to do it a little bit differently because it's just a B, it's a little funky. Okay? So I want you guys to keep in mind, peeps, that the tense sign is a B, but I'm going to show you, because again, it'll come up in a couple chapters. It is a B, but I'm just going to go ahead and show you the endings as a whole here. Okay? But here they are. So we've got our stem, and then this is what we're going to add to make the future active indicative. We're going to add bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. And I think that's a little easier than going, oh, is, it, imus, itis, unt, or whatever. But again, if that's easier, because actually it is, right? Ost, mustis, unt. But the vowel does a little bit of shifting stuff. So anyway, whatever's easiest for you. But what the main thing to keep in mind is when I see that B, not ba, but just the B, I'm dealing with a future verb. Okay? So the chant that the students learn is bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. Bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. And again and again. Right? So here actually our conjugation is pretty easy. Manebo, manebis, manebit, manebimus, manebitis, manebunt. There it is. So that B tells me I'm dealing with a future verb, future tense verb.
So you don't have to kill any macrons.
You don't have to kill any macrons in the future, which is kind of nice. Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. Okay. Good deal. Does that make sense? Russ, Kate, good. I'm seeing Kate nodding. Awesome. Questions from y'all? Does that make sense? Okay, let's just for fun, then let's look at some of our sentences, just because I want to show you how quickly you can train your eyes to look for the tenses. Okay? So on practice and review on page 34. Okay, practice and review, page 34. Number 1. I'll read it in Latin, and I want you guys to look for the verb, and I just want you to tell me what tense the verb is in. And some of these you might have to guess, because you might say, well, what if it's a verb that ends in a B? Okay, it could be that. Okay, here we go. Officium liberos viros semper vocabat. What tense do you think that verb's in?
Ba, imperfect.
Good, ba, imperfect. There it is, ba, imperfect. Okay, number 2. Habebimus ne multos viros et feminas magnorum animorum. This one's tough. Ne at the end is basically the Latin equivalent of the Spanish upside down question mark. They put the little question mark at the beginning of the sentence also to let you know you have an interrogative coming. It's called an inclinic. It's a really fancy word.
Habe, bimus, ne is future.
Bimus, good. So you've got bimus, habe, bimus. There it is. Habe, bimus. Okay? Number 3. Pericula belli non sunt parva. Stop there. What's our verb?
Sunt.
Sunt, good. What tense is that verb in?
Present.
Good, just present. Yep, nothing special there. It said, patria tua te vocabit et agricolae adiuvabunt.
Wakabit is future.
Bit, good. Bovis, bit. There's another verb. Good, another future. Good. Adiuvabunt, good. So you have 2 future verbs. Okay? Let's do one more. Propter corpus malorum patria nostra non volebit.
Future.
Future, good. Bobis bit. There it is. And then amazing how quickly your eyes can start to look for that once you know, right? And so this is the neat thing, but again, it's just different from English. Latin contains all of that information in that letter, right? I see that B and then O. That's different from, I warn, it becomes I will warn. Just that B tells me that. Okay? So it's really packed with a lot of, there's a lot of observation that you have to do. Okay? So that's the verbs. There's actually nothing more complicated. And here's the extra good news is this is actually the more complicated of the 2 systems. So the present system is actually, most students would say, this is actually the harder system. The perfect system is super normal. That's really nice. Okay? But that's half of the systems.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
You know how they put the, if it's a first conjugation pattern, they just put a 1?
Yes.
Do they do a 2?
The reason why they don't do a 2 is because the second conjugation is less stable than the first.
Okay.
So the first conjugation will always go, 99 times out of 100 go, o, are, awi, atum. So, amo, amare, amawi, amatum. Umbalo, umbalare, umbalawi, umbalatum. Yowo, yowara, yowawi, yowatum. They always, 99 times out of 100, will follow that pattern. So, let me just write that. O, are, awi, atum. those will 99 times out of 100 be those endings for the first conjugation pattern. Festino, festinare, festinavi, festinato. Okay?
But that's not the case for second.
That's not the second. The second will vary a little more than that.
Okay.
Okay. Again, still pretty. You have some things that are pretty normal, but usually with the second, you just kind of have to memorize the forms. Okay. All right. Then the second thing, and actually this is kind of neat. Our fifth graders have started to see this, or they've seen the opposite of it rather. The other thing that they touch on is, what about when you have adjectives that end in ER? So you'll notice this when you get into your vocabulary, that there are adjectives that, instead of, say, ending in us, iratus, irata, iratum, or litus, lita, litum, whatever they are, they're, instead of ending in us, they'll end in er, okay? But the same exact idea is in play. So I think that one of the first ones they'll give you is beautiful. There's a great English word is pulchritude, which is just a noun that means beauty. But it sounds so much better. Your pulchritude is astounding. So pulchra, pulchrum. And one thing that's worth noting is the stem has actually changed. Do you see how the E drops out? Pulcher to pulchra. So besides just that it ends in ER in its second declension form, the main thing that we actually want to keep in mind is that more often than not, you're going to have a stem change here. So if I decline this adjective, as I decline it out, I'm going to have pulcher if I need to modify, the man, the beautiful man, such and such. But as I decline it, remembering that I always build off of the genitive, these are showing me what the stem is going to become. The stem is going to become Pulchr. Okay. So in our vocab, they have some that don't. For example, liber, libera, liberum, which means free. Which, by the way, liber means free, liber means book. In English, the vowels are swapped. Right? Liberty, free. Library, book. But in Latin, it's flipped. So if that helps you to remember it, they're flipped. But then you just might remember, wait, are they flipped or are they the same? They're flipped. Okay, so that one doesn't drop the E. Liber, libera, liberum. Noster, nostra, nostro. Does that one change? It does. It drops out the E. Pulcher, pulchra, pulchrum. Yes. Okay? So that's kind of the last thing that they're just letting you know is, when you see these adjectives that end in ER or R, just to be aware that sometimes that stem is going to change. Sometimes that E is going to drop out. And it's the same thing with nouns in the second declension. That, for example, the word field, ugger, right? Ugger, and we know this in English, right? Ugger, uggery. We don't say agriculture, we say agriculture. So that same phenomenon where the E drops out, that's what's happening there. All right. Anything else? That's kind of it for the chapter. So the main thing is just those verb tenses. But otherwise, for next time, for the translations, do the translations, and then we'll do lesson 6 grammar next time. Okay? All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for hanging out for a long time, and forgive me for my email confusion.
So we haven't seen any ER.
See you, Russ. See you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
We haven't seen any ER adjectives up to this point, right?
No, these will be the first.
Okay.
Yeah, these will. I'm trying to think. Like they. Let me see. Yeah, you haven't seen them before, and like the 5th graders haven't seen them either. Though they did have a really cool sentence. I wonder if Madeline got right, because we went over it in class, and then I was like, let's see who will actually get this right. But you have this sentence: puer irata est, and so they had to change the adjective. Mm-hmm. And this is the first instance, and this is so brutally hard for kids. I mean, this is really hard because they start thinking, oh, the rule is that the adjective always looks like the noun. No, that is not the rule. The rule is that it always matches it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I brought this up and I said, okay, what is the masculine form of irata? Is it irater? Like, no, that's not our vocab word. I was like, good, what's your vocab word? Iratus is actually a word. So the boy is angry. Or if you're doing philosophy, the angry boy is. I don't know, there's like something deep there. Anyway, so that's their first exposure to it. We will do this exercise. And I'm just going to tell you now, because it's going to be so frustrating for your kids. You'll love it. Last year, my class, we had to do it, I think we did it 3 or 4 times. Because we're going to get to the third declension. And what is going to happen then is you're going to have adjectives of a completely different pattern modifying nouns of a different pattern. So you'll get something like this. Like, I see, what do I see?
Wait a minute, how can adjectives be of a different pattern? Because I thought they always...
So far, all of our adjectives are first and second. But
so there's other.
There's one more pattern that an adjective can be, and
So
that's the third declension.
The
pattern.
2 are just that they can end in us or that they can end in
So far we have us, and then and But what we're about to get to, the word easy is coming to my mind, ironically, is fuckless, Okay. It's just Latin. Sorry, I'm used to teaching kids. Okay, so
when did the kids laugh at that? What age?
oh, they.
Hopefully,
I'm just curious.
You know what's funny?
I don't think they would
Now
know
this is a true story.
Yeah.
So there are. This is just because it's Monday night.
Yeah.
This is awesome. So there are 4 irregular imperatives in Latin.
Yeah.
And they are duke, which would be like lead me to the person, duke me. The other would be tell me, dic me. The other would be bring me, faire me. And the other one would be do me, fuck me. So when they learn that, I can't remember what. I swear. So you have dic, duke, faire, and fuck. And the funny thing is, when they learn that, you can just see in the class that there's a mixture of kids who know what that's about and who don't, you know? And so you'll kind of have some kids like, are we? What just happened? And this is my guilty pleasure. I had a math teacher, and I would often tutor in her room because I taught in this basement, and so I would review, and every time I would review these irregular imperatives, she was like, I don't know how you keep a straight face when you say that. And I was like, it's just that. It's just a sound. It's not a bad sound. But anyway, it is really funny when you do things like that. So all this to say is, so let's say you had an easy task. That's not a good example. An easy woman. That has different meanings. Okay. But just, okay, for that, okay, whatever. You have an easy woman. Okay, so you have femina. So let's say that the woman is easy. This is good stuff. Okay. Femina est. Okay, so this adjective is from the third pattern. This is the nominative form for masculine and feminine. So it actually would be femina est facilis. The woman is easy. So
that's a quote from Ovid, right?
that's exactly right. So this exercise is so hard for students.
Yeah. Because
they, this in no way looks like this. And it's not just like an us exception. It looks very different. And so that exercise, I'll know the chapter, and if I forget, I'll do my best to email the class even to say, hey, just so you know, we're probably going to redo this exercise 3 times. Because it's so, even though they've never been told it looks the same, which is why I try really hard to drill the adjective rule, because I have inherited students in the past who were told, oh, it always looks the same. Not so. So all I have to say is, there is a third pattern, and in nouns, there are actually 5 patterns. So, for example, the famous one, if you walk on the streets of Italy today, you'll still see it. Res publica. So, or no, that's not where you'll see it. But anyway, the word republic in Latin is res publica, literally public thing, or the public matter. So this is a 4th pattern. That's a 5th pattern. Hello, 5th declension. Yikes. This is first, right? So we have a first declension adjective and a fifth declension noun, but these are matching. This is a
For
feminine.
adjectives, you call it like a first declension pattern if it's the us, a,
Yes. So first and second.
They're
So,
called patterns
us,
or declensions.
Declension is the fancy word.
So we should say
You should say declension, and I try with the kids, especially like in 5th grade or 4th grade. I try to use those words almost interchangeably. It's like any kind of big vocab word,
Right.
you know, where you want to say like, who is the protagonist,
Right.
the hero, you know, and you're kind of just you're sneaking in those nice big words, but you're kind of trying to love them by.
So we're going to learn the second declension, the thing now.
Yes, for us, but even for the students, I still think that's a little
while
bit
away.
off. Yeah.
Why is that? Why is that feminine? Res publica.
So the fifth declension is feminine.
Yeah, that's just feminine.
Yeah, it is. So it's kind of like
Well,
so.
But the first declension is not.
The first declension is 99.9% feminine.
But you don't call it feminine, but you do call the last one
You do, because they are all feminine. Let me think if I can come up with an example. No, the only exception I can think of is hands, which is ironic because it's word munus, and munus is feminine, like a manicure would be a. Okay, I gotta watch out nowadays. Okay, anyway, so actually there's a cool little pattern to it. So first is feminine mostly, fifth is feminine, the second and third, or I'm sorry, the second and fourth are all masculine and neuter, and then the third is all three. So you actually have this cool little pattern, even with the declensions themselves. There's this little sandwich pattern.
and in that specific case, I don't mean to be OCD about it, but the public thing, if it's referring to something that includes men, so
Yeah.
why would it be
Yeah.
feminine?
In this case, you're not necessarily even thinking about like the thing itself.
Right.
It's just that the word, and this is odd as English speakers, right? And actually a lot of kind of sloppy theology comes out of this.
Right.
So, for example, the word spirit is neuter.
Yeah.
Pneuma in Greek.
Right.
It is neuter, and in Latin, spiritum. It is neuter.
Right.
That doesn't mean that it's castrated or emasculine or unfeminine or whatever it is. The gender of a word is not always, and maybe even usually, is not about the gender of the thing signified.
In
so to
German,
speak.
the word for woman is das Mädchen.
Okay.
Das is neuter.
Is neuter,
Mädchen
okay.
is woman.
Huh.
So it's a neuter.
It's a neuter article with a...
Obviously feminine.
Yeah,
because it's a woman.
word, yeah.
Das Mädchen.
So is that word, do you call that noun neuter?
Yeah.
You do? Okay, yeah, because the adjective gives
Das,
away that it's...
Same thing though.
And that, yeah. And so you have to, you have to be really careful. And that's, I think that's the benefit of having, as much as you can, having, pastors who are really aware of some of these things.
Yeah.
So one, for example, is like Elohim is the most common Hebrew word used for God. That is plural. And the question kind of that always comes up is like, well, is that pointing to the Trinity? No. In my opinion, no, it's not, because Baal, who is a singular deity, even though he's always shacking up with other Canaanite deities, he's singular, he's not single, he is Elohim as well. And so even in the Hebrew, they don't even distinguish between like, Elohim is a true plural deity, like a Trinity.
Right.
Versus Elohim there is a fault, like the word doesn't tell you that. It's actually what I call, this is what I wrote about in my master's thesis, what I call audience, what do I call it? Audience response criticism. That is, my audience understands something because they come from a common worldview.
Okay.
So like when I'm writing about Baal, I don't even have to say, and by the way, Baal is a false god. I can just say, and the Israelites were following Baal, and my readers know that's a false god. Or Astarte, or whoever.
Baal, from what I understand, was considered the son of the